Poland, Slovakia and Hungary say they're banning the import and transit of grain from Ukraine to protect their own agricultural sectors. This comes after local farmers complained of grain coming from the war-torn country being sold below market price. But with the EU wanting to help Kyiv access the world's markets, Brussels may have to intervene. The bans are causing long delays at the borders.
A long line of Ukrainian trucks stuck at the Polish border. Drivers say they've been waiting here for days after the country announced a temporary ban on grain imports from Ukraine.
We can't go in either direction. The Poles reached out their hand to us, and I'm very thankful to them. I'm immensely grateful. The whole of Ukraine is, the whole world even. But now, Poland won't let us in for some reason. There's some kind of situation here.
Warsaw introduced the ban over the weekend as a way to address the problem of local farmers being undercut by Ukrainian grain, which is cheaper than its locally grown equivalent. Large amounts of it had been entering Poland and other border countries after the usual export route on the Black Sea was partially blocked. But instead of the grain heading onwards to global markets, logistical bottlenecks kept it stuck. That's meant Ukrainian grain has flooded local markets, driving down prices. Shortly after the Polish announcement, Hungary followed suit, and on Monday, Slovakia said it would do the same. Now, several other European countries are considering similar actions. The European Commission said it was looking into the legality of the measures.
It's important to remind that trade policy is of exclusive competence, which means that it's at European Union level that such decisions can be taken. And it's why we have been saying that unilateral action is not possible under EU trade policy.
Further complicating matters, last week Moscow said it might not extend a deal that has been allowing some grain to leave Ukraine through its Black Sea ports. With the future of Ukrainian grain exports uncertain, the EU is having to tread a fine line between supporting its farmers and supporting war-torn Ukraine.
And for more, we can now speak to our correspondents, Rosie Burchard in Brussels and Matthias Budinger in Kyiv. Rosie, I want to start with you. What can the EU do in the situation? What kind of measures can it take against the unilateral action of Poland, Hungary and Slovakia?
Well, Nicole, we just heard in that report that the European Commission, Brussels, has to now tread a fine line. Well, let me tell you, they appear to me to be treading very carefully. They simply will not be drawn on the potential consequences or sanctions or punishments of these actions. Now, they've said, for example, we heard that spokesperson saying that unilateral actions are not possible, but they did not go on then to say, and therefore Poland and other countries are in breach of the rules. Now, that's probably because they would prefer to settle this behind closed doors. Not only at stake, of course, are those Ukrainian exports, but also the look on the world stage of the European Union as a united front here. Now, I think let's focus a bit on Poland. Now, Poland has made a name for itself internationally as one of Ukraine's staunchest backers. Here in Brussels, we often have groups of ministers meeting, and Poland will always be among the first to call for more weapons for Ukraine, more quickly, more speed on Ukraine's potential path toward joining the European Union. But now that support internationally has come up against a domestic hurdle, and that's because farmers have been protesting in Poland, and Poland is a country which is facing an election this year, and those rural voters are of crucial significance to Poland's current ruling party, the Law and Justice Party. Now, I think this could be seen as a quite carefully calculated move by Warsaw, because Poland has a lot of goodwill from and about Ukraine in the bank, basically, because of that support which it's been offering. So perhaps it's willing to sort of draw down on that support with this, what now does seem to be rather a public tiff. And it may be well calculated because, on the one hand, either this ban proceeds, as Poland has put on the table, or Brussels intervenes in some way, perhaps compels Poland and those other countries, Hungary and Slovakia, to lift the ban. And in that case, well, Brussels can be blamed. And that is potentially why the European Commission seems to be quite reticent when it comes to speaking out more forcefully against these actions so far, rather just saying in a general sense that unilateral actions aren't possible, rather than name-checking or more explicitly criticising.
Yeah. Matthias, negotiations between Poland and Ukraine are ongoing. How is this dispute being perceived in Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine is, as we've just heard, very dependent on Poland, and Poland has supported Ukraine a lot. So that's why the country is being quite carefully about this. There have been ideas have been ventilated that there might be some way of allowing transit to the seaports of Poland without discharging the grain in Poland, without it entering the Polish market. Again, there are lots of technical questions about that. We've just heard there's not only a dispute between Ukraine and Poland, but also Brussels and how this would be done. The EU has slayed all import tariffs on Ukrainian goods at the beginning of the war as a means to support Ukraine, and it has especially opened its transport, mainly rail transport, for grain that was blocked because the Black Sea ports were blocked by Russia, and then subsequently Ukraine had mined the coasts, and ships basically could not export the grain, the main means of export. That's why these routes through Poland and Hungary and Slovakia, they have been a lifeline for Ukraine for much of this war, especially in the beginning. Ukraine is still dependent on these exports, but it's treading the line very carefully.
Mm-hmm. Rosie, what's going to happen next in Brussels? It's a pretty complicated picture you painted there.
Well, plenty of discussion and perhaps debate to be expected behind closed doors. We know that European Union diplomats from the 27 members will be meeting and discussing this in the coming days. Next week, there's a meeting of European Union foreign ministers, and following that, a meeting of European Union agriculture ministers. But before that, we might hear more from the European Union's executive, the European Commission, because the Commission has acknowledged that there are problems being created, market distortions that have been complained about by Poland and these other countries bordering Ukraine. And in order to respond to that, back in March, the European Commission unveiled a support package of around 56 million euros, that's around 62 million US dollars, to essentially try and compensate those farmers or those agriculture actors which are seeing prices decrease and are therefore taking a hit to their industry. Now, the European Commission says it is looking into a further support package, and we may hear news of that in the coming days. But really, the bigger question is whether this decision, this move to suspend those tariffs on import of Ukrainian agricultural products into the European Union, whether that will be extended. It's due for extension in June. The EU's executive, the European Commission, has proposed extending it, but it will be down to European Union member states to give their backing for that. And it could be that Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and other countries indeed could come together to try and block that, or to try and negotiate some sort of different move going forward. So still plenty of politics to come here in Brussels before we get a final picture of how this is going to move forward.
Matthias, we can't really talk about Ukrainian grain without talking about the grain deal, which is currently up for renegotiation, and Moscow is signaling that it might not renew it. How nervous are people in Ukraine about a possible end to that agreement?
From the very beginning, this agreement has been a very fragile agreement. There have not been much hopes that this will work over a long time, so it's quite remarkable that this is still in place. However, at the moment, quite a number of ships are stuck in Istanbul because the two sides seemingly cannot agree on the procedure, which ships to inspect first. Russia and Ukraine, together with the partners Turkey and the United Nations, inspect each ship that sails into Ukrainian ports so that Russia can make sure that it's not carrying weapons or anything that is not part of the grain deal. And it seems that at the moment this procedure has been halted. That is, of course, a means of pressure. And Russia, when the deal was last time extended, so usually the deal works for 120 days and then it is extended. Each time it is extended, there is, of course, some suspension, whether this will really work this time. Russia threatened several times to end this. Of course, this is a powerful tool for Russia to exert pressure on Ukraine, but in the end, agreements have always been reached, likely due to the pressure of Turkey, which is one of Russia's main trading partners, remaining trading partners, and of the United Nations, and of Russia's interest to export grain, their own grain and fertilizers. And as Russia's grain exports are even up this year, this has been a deal that maybe Russia is more dependent on than we sometimes think.